The conference room erupted in chaos as the 30th specialist threw his hands up in defeat. "It's impossible," Dr. Harrison declared, his voice cracking under pressure. "The algorithm is eating itself alive, and we can't figure out why." Zara Whitmore pressed herself against the glass door, clutching her temporary employee badge. She wasn't supposed to be here. The job posting had said basic administrative duties, not front row seats to what looked like a corporate meltdown worth billions. "Gentlemen," came a deep voice that cut through the panic like steel, "we have 6 hours before the Tokyo markets open. If we can't stabilize the trading platform, Blackridge Industries will lose every major client we have." Zara's breath caught. The man speaking had to be Kieran Ashford himself. Even from behind, his presence commanded the room. Dark hair, broad shoulders in an expensive suit, and an authority that made grown men fall silent. "Sir, we've run every diagnostic possible," stammered a woman with thick glasses. "The system keeps rejecting legitimate trades while approving obviously fraudulent ones. It's like someone rewrote the core validation protocols, but we can't find any unauthorized access." Zara's mathematical mind began processing what she'd heard. She pulled out her phone, quickly sketching the problem as she understood it. Trading platform, validation errors, pattern recognition failure. "What about the neural network weights?" asked another specialist. "Completely scrambled. But here's the weird part. They're not random. There's definitely a pattern, but none of our guys can crack it." Pattern. Zara's pulse quickened. She'd written her thesis on mathematical patterns in seemingly random data sets. Her fingers moved across the phone screen, working through possibilities. "Maybe we're looking at this wrong," Dr. Harrison continued. "What if someone didn't hack the system from outside? What if they modified the training data months ago, and the AI learned to recognize the wrong patterns?" Wrong patterns. Zara's eyes widened as understanding hit her like lightning. She knew exactly what was happening. "The Fibonacci spiral," she whispered, too quiet for anyone to hear. She looked at her rough calculations again. If someone had embedded a mathematical sequence into the training data, the AI would have learned to recognize it as legitimate, while rejecting everything else. But why use Fibonacci? Unless... Her heart pounded as she realized the elegance of the sabotage. Fibonacci sequences appeared naturally in financial markets all the time. It was the perfect camouflage for malicious code. The AI thought it was following market patterns when it was actually following planted instructions. "We're shutting down the entire platform," Kieran announced. "Better to lose a day of trading than everything." "Wait," Zara heard herself say. The entire room turned to stare at her through the glass. She felt heat rise in her cheeks as 30 pairs of eyes fixed on the temp secretary who'd just interrupted a billion-dollar crisis meeting. Kieran stepped toward the door. "I'm sorry, who are you?" "Zara Whitmore. I just started today, but I think I know what's wrong with your system." A few specialists chuckled. Dr. Harrison rolled his eyes. "Miss, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but this is a highly complex algorithmic issue that requires years of expertise to understand." "It's the golden ratio," Zara said, her voice growing stronger. "Someone trained your AI to recognize Fibonacci sequences as legitimate trading patterns. That's why it's approving the fake trades. They're mathematically perfect, following the 1.618 ratio exactly. Your real trades look random by comparison." The room went dead silent. Kieran's steel blue eyes locked onto hers. "Explain." "Financial markets do follow mathematical patterns naturally, but whoever sabotaged your system exploited that. They fed the AI training data loaded with artificial Fibonacci sequences, teaching it that only those patterns represent valid trades. The fraudulent transactions aren't random. They're following a mathematical formula that looks more natural to your system than actual human trading behavior." She could see the wheels turning in Kieran's mind. "How would we test this theory?" "Run a sample of the approved fraudulent trades through a Fibonacci calculator. I guarantee they'll match the sequence almost perfectly. Then check your rejected legitimate trades. They'll show normal market volatility, which the AI now sees as suspicious." Dr. Harrison was already pulling up data on his laptop. "Jesus Christ, she's right. Look at this. Every single approved fraudulent trade follows the exact same mathematical progression. Can we fix it?" Kieran asked, his gaze never leaving Zara's face. "Easier than you think. Purge the corrupted training data, retrain the AI with clean datasets, and add randomness parameters to prevent this type of pattern exploitation in the future. Should take about 2 hours. The specialists immediately began working, their voices excited as they implemented her solution. But Kieran continued staring at her, an unreadable expression on his face. "Miss Whitmore," he said quietly, "I think we need to talk." Zara's stomach fluttered. Something in his tone suggested this conversation would change everything. Kieran's corner office felt smaller than Zara had imagined. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan, but she couldn't focus on the view. Her hands trembled slightly as she sat across from the man who'd just watched her solve a problem that had stumped his entire tech department. "Whitmore," he said, leaning back in his leather chair. "That's not a common name." "I suppose not." Zara shifted uncomfortably. Something in his tone had changed from impressed to almost suspicious. "Marcus Whitmore. Ever heard that name?" Her heart stopped. "That was my father." Kieran's expression transformed completely. The professional mask slipped away, revealing something raw and painful underneath. "Your father was Marcus Whitmore." "Yes. He died 10 years ago in a car accident." She studied his face, confused by his reaction. "Did you know him?" "Know him?" Kieran almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. Marcus hadn't just been his business partner. He'd been his best friend, his mentor, the man who'd taught him everything about running a company. The man whose death had never made sense. "Marcus was my partner when we founded Blackridge Industries," Kieran said quietly. "We built this company together." Zara's world tilted. "That's impossible. My father worked for a small accounting firm. He never mentioned any partnership." "Your mother never told you?" Kieran stood and walked to a wall safe hidden behind a painting. He withdrew a photograph and handed it to her. The image showed 2 young men in their 20s, arms around each other's shoulders, standing in front of a small office with Blackridge Whitmore Technologies painted on the window. One was clearly a younger version of Kieran. The other was unmistakably her father. "After he died, I had the name changed to just Blackridge Industries. I couldn't bear seeing his name every day, knowing he was gone." Zara stared at the photo, her mind reeling. "But why didn't my mother ever tell me? Why were we always struggling financially if he owned half a company?" Kieran's jaw tightened. "Because according to the legal documents filed after his death, Marcus had sold his shares back to me 6 months before the accident. Documents I never signed. Documents I'd never seen until after his funeral." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your father's death wasn't an accident, and someone stole your inheritance." Before Zara could respond, the office door opened without a knock. A stunning blonde woman in a tailored black suit entered, her green eyes immediately assessing the situation. "Kieran, darling, I've been looking everywhere for you. The board meeting has been moved up too." She stopped mid-sentence when she saw Zara. "Oh, I wasn't aware you had company. Vivian Sterling, meet Zara Whitmore." "Zara, this is our Chief Operating Officer." Vivian's perfectly composed expression flickered for just a moment. "Whitmore? How interesting." "Zara is Marcus's daughter," Kieran continued, watching Vivian's reaction carefully. "Marcus Whitmore." Vivian's smile became razor-sharp. "I remember him. Such a tragic accident. And so young." Her eyes fixed on Zara with predatory interest. "You have his eyes." Something cold crawled up Zara's spine. There was something wrong with how Vivian was looking at her, like she was solving a puzzle she didn't like the answer to. "I should go," Zara said, standing abruptly. "This is all too much to process." "Actually," Kieran said, "I'd like to offer you a position. Head of our new mathematical analysis division. The department didn't exist an hour ago, but after what you accomplished today, I think we need it." "That's quite a promotion for someone who started as a temp this morning," Vivian said, her voice honey-sweet with an undertone of steel. "Sometimes talent reveals itself when we least expect it," Kieran replied, not taking his eyes off Zara. "I need time to think," Zara managed. "Of course. Take the weekend." "But Zara," Kieran's voice stopped her at the door. "Be careful. If I'm right about your father's death, then whoever killed him is still out there. And now they know you exist." After Zara left, Vivian closed the office door and turned to face Kieran. "That was incredibly stupid." "Excuse me." "Marcus Whitmore's daughter showing up here, solving problems our best people couldn't handle, and you immediately promote her? Don't you think that's a bit coincidental?" Kieran studied his COO's face. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that maybe someone sent her here. Maybe she's not as innocent as she appears." Vivian moved closer to his desk. Kieran, you've spent 10 years obsessing over Marcus's death. Don't let that obsession cloud your judgment about his daughter. My judgment seems fine. She saved us millions today. Or she created the problem in the first place and then conveniently solved it. Did that occur to you? Kieran's eyes narrowed. That's quite an accusation. It's a reasonable theory. Who else would know enough about our systems to create that specific type of sabotage? And who would be better positioned to gain access than the daughter of your former partner, playing on your guilt and grief? Vivian's words planted seeds of doubt that Kieran hated himself for considering. But he'd learned the hard way that trusting the wrong person could destroy everything. I want her watched, Vivian continued. Discreetly. If she's innocent, no harm done. If she's not. She left the threat unfinished. After Vivian left, Kieran stared out at the city lights, his reflection ghost-like in the window. Marcus's daughter. After all these years, she'd walked right into his life, brilliant and beautiful and completely unaware of the dangers surrounding her. He pulled out his phone and dialed a familiar number. Phoenix? It's Kieran. I need you to dig up everything you can find on Zara Whitmore. And Phoenix? Be thorough. Her life might depend on it. 3 weeks into her new position, Zara had developed an uncanny ability to read Kieran's moods from the way he held his coffee cup. Loose grip meant good news from the markets. White knuckles meant someone was about to get fired. This morning, he wasn't holding coffee at all, which meant something was seriously wrong. The pattern's back, he said without preamble as she entered his office for their daily briefing. Zara's stomach dropped. Same Fibonacci sequence? No, this time it's prime numbers. Someone's getting creative. She moved to the wall display where trading data scrolled in real time. The numbers told a story that made her blood run cold. Whoever had sabotaged their system before wasn't finished. They were escalating. Show me the affected accounts, she said. Kieran pressed a button on his desk. These are just from this morning. The list of compromised transactions filled the screen. Millions of dollars in fraudulent trades, all following mathematical sequences that would be invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for them. But Zara saw the pattern immediately. It's not random, she murmured, her mind racing. Look at the account numbers being targeted. Kieran moved closer to examine the data, close enough that she caught his scent, something expensive and masculine that made her pulse quicken. She forced herself to focus on the numbers. I don't see it, he admitted. The targeted accounts all belong to pension funds and retirement savings. Whoever's doing this isn't just stealing money. They're destroying people's futures. Her voice hardened. This is personal. Personal how? Someone wants to hurt you specifically. They could steal from high net worth accounts and make more money with less risk. But they're choosing targets that will generate maximum public outrage when this gets out. Kieran's jaw tightened. So this is about destroying my reputation, not just theft. Exactly. The question is who hates you enough to orchestrate something this elaborate. Before he could answer, Vivian appeared in the doorway. Sorry to interrupt, but the SEC is on line 3. Apparently, they have questions about our trading algorithms. Zara watched Kieran's face carefully. There it was, that micro-expression she'd learned to recognize. A tightening around his eyes that meant he was about to lie or omit something important. Tell them I'll call back, he said. Kieran, you can't keep putting them off. They're threatening a formal investigation. I said I'll handle it. After Vivian left, Zara studied his reflection in the window. There's something you're not telling me. There are a lot of things I'm not telling you. Things about my father? He turned to face her directly. Would you believe me if I said I was trying to protect you? I'd believe you were trying to protect something. Whether it's me or your own secrets, I'm not sure. The honesty in her voice seemed to break something in his resolve. He moved to his desk and pulled out a locked drawer, withdrawing a manila file folder. These are Phoenix's preliminary findings about your father's death. I wasn't planning to show you this yet, but maybe you deserve to know what we're dealing with. Zara opened the file with trembling hands. Police reports, insurance documents, witness statements. But it was the photographs that made her gasp. The accident scene looked wrong. The skid marks, the angle of impact, the location where her father's car had left the road. The investigating officer noted several inconsistencies. Kieran said quietly, Your father was an excellent driver. The weather was clear. His car was in perfect condition. Yet somehow he missed a curve he'd driven hundreds of times and crashed into the only tree within 50 yards. Maybe he fell asleep. Maybe he had a heart attack. The autopsy showed no medical issues. And look at this. He pointed to a photograph of tire tracks. These marks suggest another vehicle was involved. Someone forced him off the road. Zara sank into a chair, the weight of implications crushing down on her. Someone murdered my father. I believe so. And I think the same person who killed him is sabotaging our systems now. Why wait 10 years? Maybe they're not waiting. Maybe they've been planning this the entire time. Kieran sat on the edge of his desk, closer to her now. Zara, I need you to understand something. If I'm right, then you're in danger just by being here. Then why did you hire me? The question hung between them like a live wire. Kieran's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. The air in the office seemed to thicken. Because I'm selfish, he said finally. Because having you here feels like having a piece of Marcus back. And because... He stopped himself. Because what? Because I'm falling for you. And that's the worst possible thing that could happen right now. The admission hit Zara like a physical blow. She'd felt the tension building between them. The way his hand lingered when he passed her documents. The way he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking. But hearing him say it out loud changed everything. Kieran, I know it's inappropriate. I know it's complicated. But I can't pretend anymore that this is just about finding your father's killer or protecting the company. When I look at you, I see. His desk phone buzzed. Mr. Ashford? There's been another breach. This one's bigger. The moment shattered. Kieran straightened, his professional mask sliding back into place. But when their eyes met again, Zara saw something there that made her breath catch. What? Raw and honest and dangerous. We'll continue this conversation later, he said. But they both knew some lines, once crossed, couldn't be uncrossed. The first sign something was wrong came with the morning coffee. Zara's usual order had been replaced with something that tasted like burnt rubber, and when she politely asked the cafeteria staff about it, they claimed she'd specifically requested the change yesterday. She hadn't. The second sign was the missing files. 3 critical reports she'd compiled for the board meeting had vanished from both her computer and the shared server. When she mentioned it to Kieran, he found them exactly where she'd supposedly saved them, in a folder labeled Personal Projects that she'd never created. Maybe you were distracted, he suggested gently, but she caught the flicker of doubt in his eyes. By the third incident, Zara knew she was being set up. I'm telling you, I never authorized those trades, she insisted, standing in Kieran's office while Vivian sat primly in the corner, watching with barely concealed satisfaction. The evidence was damning. Trading algorithms bearing Zara's digital signature had moved millions of dollars in suspicious patterns. Not the mathematical sequences they'd been tracking, but something else. Something that looked like insider trading. The system shows you logged in at 2:47 a.m., Vivian said, consulting her tablet. Quite late for someone who claims to have been home sleeping. Check the security cameras. Check my keycard records. I wasn't here. Unfortunately, there was a glitch in our security system that night, Vivian replied smoothly. The cameras malfunctioned, and the keycard readers were offline for maintenance. How convenient. Zara's hands clenched into fists. This is ridiculous. Why would I sabotage the company that just promoted me? Money, Vivian said simply. These trades netted someone approximately $2 million. That's a lot of motivation for a woman who was struggling to pay rent 3 weeks ago. Kieran had been silent throughout the exchange, his face unreadable. Now he looked up from the reports spread across his desk. The digital signatures could be forged. Theoretically, yes, Vivian agreed. But it would require someone with intimate knowledge of our security protocols and Zara's personal access codes. The kind of knowledge that would be very difficult for an outsider to obtain. The implication was clear. Either Zara was guilty, or she'd been careless enough to let someone else use her credentials. Neither option looked good. I need to make some calls, Kieran said finally. Zara, take the rest of the day off. We'll sort this out tomorrow. It felt like a dismissal. Worse, it felt like he was already convinced of her guilt. Zara gathered her things in silence, aware of Vivian's smug smile following her out of the office. In the elevator, she tried to process what had just happened. Someone was systematically destroying her credibility, and they were doing it with surgical precision. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Coffee shop on 42nd and Lex. Corner booth. Come alone. Zara stared at the message. It could be a trap, but staying passive while someone destroyed her life wasn't an option. She headed for the coffee shop. Vivian was already waiting when she arrived, looking perfectly at ease in her designer suit. She traded her usual predatory smile for something that almost resembled sympathy. You came. I wasn't sure you would. What do you want? Zara slid into the opposite seat, her guard up. To help you understand what you're really dealing with. Vivian stirred her latte slowly. You think this is about you, but it's not. It's about Kieran. I don't know what you mean. Of course you don't. You're an innocent little mathematician who stumbled into a game she doesn't understand. Vivian's green eyes glittered with malice. Tell me, Zara, when did you first realize Kieran knew exactly who you were? The question hit like a physical blow. What? Oh, come now. You don't really believe your hiring was a coincidence, do you? The daughter of Marcus Whitmore just happens to walk into Blackridge Industries and solve a crisis that stumped 30 experts? How delightfully convenient. Zara's world tilted. You're lying. Am I? Think about it logically. Your father was Kieran's business partner. Did you really think he wouldn't recognize the name Whitmore? Did you honestly believe he promoted you based solely on your mathematical skills? Each word was a dagger, precisely aimed at Zara's deepest insecurities. Even if he recognized my name, that doesn't mean he's been investigating your father's death for 10 years, Vivian interrupted. Did he mention that little detail? He hired a private investigator specifically to dig into Marcus's accident. When you showed up here, he saw an opportunity to get closer to the truth. You're making this up. Vivian pulled out her phone and showed Zara a series of email exchanges. Kieran's name was clearly visible in the Cinder field, along with detailed discussions about surveillance and background checks on the Whitmore family. He's been watching you for weeks before you even applied for the job, Vivian continued. Your financial troubles, your living situation, your employment history. He knew exactly how desperate you were when he offered you that position. The emails looked authentic. Zara's hands shook as she scrolled through them, each message confirming her worst fears. Kieran hadn't hired her because of her abilities. He'd hired her because of her name. But here's the interesting part, Vivian said, leaning forward. I don't think he expected to actually fall for you. That wasn't part of the plan. What plan? To use you as bait, of course. Think about it from his perspective. If someone killed Marcus, they might come after his daughter too. Especially if she started asking the right questions or getting too close to the truth. The coffee shop suddenly felt too warm. Zara struggled to breathe as the implications sank in. He's using me as bait? Was using you as bait. Past tense. Vivian's smile turned almost pitying. The problem is, somewhere along the way, he actually started caring about you. And that's made him sloppy. Sloppy how? He's protecting you instead of letting the killer make their move. That's not very helpful for solving Marcus's murder, is it? Zara stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. I need to go. Of course you do. But Zara? Vivian's voice stopped her. When you confront him about this, ask yourself one question. If he truly cared about you, wouldn't he have been honest from the beginning? The walk back to her apartment was a blur. Zara's mind raced through every interaction she'd had with Kieran, re-examining each moment through this new lens. The way he'd looked at her when she'd said her name. His immediate recognition of her father. The rapid promotion that had seemed too good to be true. Because it was too good to be true. Her phone rang. Kieran's name flashed on the screen. Zara? I've been thinking about the trading irregularities. There are some inconsistencies in the timestamps that suggest, did you know who I was when you hired me? The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several heartbeats too long. Zara, where are you? We should discuss this in person. Answer the question, Kieran. Did you know I was Marcus Whitmore's daughter when you offered me the job? Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice was careful, measured. Yes, I knew. The admission shattered something inside her chest. Was any of it real? The promotion, the partnership, the way you looked at me? Everything between us is real. But Zara, you have to understand. She hung up and turned off her phone. Standing alone in her tiny apartment, surrounded by the modest furniture of someone who'd never had much, Zara finally understood the true scope of her naivety. She'd thought she was the brilliant mathematician who'd impressed the powerful CEO. Instead, she was just another pawn in a game she'd never even known she was playing. The worst part wasn't the deception. It was realizing that despite everything, she was still in love with him. Kieran hadn't slept in 3 days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the look on Zara's face when she'd hung up on him. Betrayal, hurt, and something worse than anger. Disappointment. He'd called 17 times. She'd answered zero. You look like hell, Vivian observed, entering his office with her usual predatory grace. Perhaps you should consider that some relationships aren't worth the destruction they cause. I didn't ask for your opinion. No, but you need it anyway. She settled into the chair across from his desk, crossing her legs with deliberate precision. The board is asking questions about Zara's continued employment. Given the irregularities in her trading activity, which we both know she didn't cause. Do we? Vivian's eyebrows arched elegantly. The evidence suggests otherwise. And now she's refusing to come to work, refusing to answer calls, acting exactly like someone who's been caught. Kieran's hands clenched on his desk. She's acting like someone who's been betrayed by the person she trusted most. How dramatic. But trust is earned, Kieran, not given blindly. Perhaps if you'd been more honest from the beginning, get out. Excuse me. I said get out. Before I do something we'll both regret. After Vivian left, Kieran stared at his phone, thumb hovering over Zara's number. What could he say that would make any difference? That he'd started with ulterior motives, but fallen in love along the way. That using her as bait had seemed logical until it became impossible because the thought of her in danger made him physically sick? The truth was, he'd handled everything wrong from the moment she'd walked into his life. Meanwhile, across town, Zara was discovering that Rock Bottom had a basement. Miss Whitmore, I'm Phoenix Hartwell. The man standing outside her apartment looked like he'd stepped out of a noir film. Weathered face, kind eyes, and an expression that suggested he'd seen enough of the world's ugliness to recognize it instantly. If Kieran sent you, he didn't. Not for this. Phoenix held up a manila envelope. May I come in? What I have to show you isn't appropriate for a hallway conversation. Against her better judgment, Zara led him inside. Her apartment suddenly felt even smaller with this stranger in it, but something about his demeanor suggested he wasn't there to hurt her. I've been investigating your father's death for Kieran, Phoenix began without preamble. But in the course of that investigation, I discovered something else. Something about your family's financial situation that doesn't add up. I don't understand. Phoenix opened the envelope and spread documents across her coffee table. These are copies of legal filings from 10 years ago. After your father died, several documents were submitted to the court regarding his business interests. Zara recognized some of the paperwork. Her mother had shown her similar documents when explaining why they'd had to sell the house, why college would require loans, why everything had changed after her father's death. According to these records, your father sold his 50% stake in Blackridge Industries 6 months before he died. The sale generated $12 million, which was supposedly placed in an offshore account that your mother couldn't access due to legal complications. That's what we were told, yes. Some kind of banking issue that tied up the money indefinitely. Phoenix pulled out another set of documents. Here's the problem. I had a handwriting expert analyze the signatures on the sale documents. They're forgeries. Your father never sold his shares. The words hit Zara like a physical blow. What? Someone forged his signature and fabricated the entire sale. But it gets worse. Phoenix's expression darkened. The power of attorney used to execute the sale was signed by someone claiming to act on behalf of your father's estate. Want to guess who? He handed her a document that made her blood run cold. Vivian Sterling's signature, clear as day, authorizing the transfer of Marcus Whitmore's shares to Kieran Ashford for the nominal sum of $1. This doesn't make sense. Vivian wasn't even part of the company then. Actually, she was. She'd been working as a junior associate in the legal department for about 6 months when your father died. Young, ambitious, and apparently willing to do whatever it took to climb the corporate ladder. Zara's mind raced through the implications. So Vivian stole my father's shares and gave them to Kieran? Not gave. Sold them to herself using a shell corporation, then immediately transferred them to Kieran. She made herself rich and earned his gratitude in one move. But the $12 million never existed. The offshore account was fictional. Someone wanted your family to believe the money was tied up in legal red tape, so you wouldn't ask too many questions about why you never saw it. The room spun around Zara. Everything she'd believed about her family's financial struggles had been a lie. They hadn't been victims of bureaucratic complications. They'd been victims of theft. Does Kieran know? Phoenix hesitated. That's where things get complicated. The transfer documents show him as the recipient of the shares, but they're dated 6 months after the forgery. It's possible he received them thinking the sale was legitimate. But he would have known my father never intended to sell, unless someone convinced him otherwise. Vivian had access to internal communications. She could have fabricated evidence showing that Marcus wanted out of the partnership. Zara felt sick. So either Kieran was complicit in stealing my inheritance, or he was manipulated into accepting stolen property. There's a third possibility, Phoenix said gently. He discovered the truth later and has been trying to figure out how to make it right without destroying his own company in the process. What do you mean? If this forgery comes to light, it invalidates the transfer of shares. Legally, you still own 50% of Blackridge Industries. That would make you Kieran's equal partner, not his employee. The magnitude of the revelation left Zara speechless. She wasn't a struggling mathematician who'd gotten lucky with a job. She was the rightful heir to a multi-billion-dollar company. Why are you telling me this? Why not Kieran? Phoenix's expression grew grim. Because I think Vivian knows I'm getting close to the truth. And I think she's planning something to make sure it never comes out. As if summoned by his words, Zara's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop digging or join Daddy. The blood drained from her face. Phoenix saw the message and swore under his breath. Pack a bag, he said. You're not safe here. I can't just disappear. I have a job, responsibilities. Zara, listen to me very carefully. Whoever killed your father has just threatened to kill you too. Your job doesn't matter if you're dead. But even as she threw clothes into a suitcase, Zara's mind wasn't on the threat. It was on Kieran, and whether the man she'd fallen in love with was her protector or her enemy. She was about to find out which. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in Queens that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. Zara sat at the kitchen table, staring at the documents Phoenix had spread before her, while he made phone calls in the next room. The legal papers might as well have been written in a foreign language for all the comfort they provided. Her phone had been ringing constantly. Kieran's name flashed on the screen for the 20th time in 2 hours. You should answer, Phoenix said, ending his call and returning to the kitchen. He's worried about you. He should be worried about himself. Someone's trying to destroy his company. Our investigation suggests the current sabotage follows the exact same pattern as the incidents leading up to your father's death. System failures, financial irregularities, mounting pressure from regulators. It's like someone's following a playbook. Before Zara could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. Interesting choice of accommodations. But you can't hide forever. Phoenix grabbed the phone, his face darkening. How the hell did she get this number? Does it matter? She found me anyway. A second text appeared. Coffee shop on Queensboro Plaza. 1 hour. Come alone, or tomorrow's headlines will destroy your father's memory forever. Absolutely not, Phoenix said. It's obviously a trap. But Zara was already reaching for her jacket. She has something on my father. Something bad enough to use as leverage. Zara, this woman is dangerous. She's already killed once. Which is exactly why I need to find out what she knows. An hour later, Zara found herself across from Vivian in a coffee shop that had seen better decades. The blonde woman looked perfectly composed, as if meeting in sketchy Queens locations was a regular part of her routine. You came. I wasn't entirely certain you would. What do you want, Vivian? To make you an offer. Vivian slid a tablet across the table. Take a look. The screen showed a news article draft, complete with headline. Tech executive's dark past. How Marcus Whitmore embezzled millions before fatal crash. The byline belonged to a prominent financial journalist known for breaking corporate scandals. This is fabricated, Zara said, but her voice lacked conviction. The article was detailed, complete with falsified documents and expert quotes that made her father look like a criminal who died fleeing justice. Is it? Your father had access to all the company accounts. He worked late nights before his death. And conveniently, he died just before a major audit that would have exposed his crimes. None of that is true. Truth is subjective, darling. What matters is perception. This article will run tomorrow morning unless you and I reach an understanding. Zara forced herself to keep reading. The article painted Marcus as a gambling addict who'd stolen millions to cover his debts, then died in a car crash while fleeing to Mexico with the money. It was character assassination of the highest order. What kind of understanding? You disappear, quietly, resign from Blackridge, leave New York, and never contact Kieran again. In exchange, this article never sees print. and your father's reputation remains intact. And if I refuse? Vivian's smile turned predatory. Then tomorrow morning, every major financial publication in the country will run this story. Your father will be remembered as a thief and a coward. Is that really how you want his legacy to end? The cruelty of it took Zara's breath away. Why are you doing this? Because you're in the way. In the way of what? The natural order of things. Vivian leaned back, her composure absolute. Kieran was supposed to be mine. We had an understanding, a future planned. Then you walked in with your sad story and your brilliant mind, and suddenly he's playing the white knight instead of focusing on what really matters, which is building an empire. Kieran has the vision and the drive to make Blackridge Industries the most powerful tech company in the world. But he's soft, sentimental. He needs someone who understands that success requires sacrifice. Someone like you. Exactly like me. Vivian's eyes glittered with ambition. I've spent 10 years positioning myself for this moment. I eliminated the obstacles, cleared the path, made the hard choices Kieran couldn't make himself. The casual admission of murder sent ice through Zara's veins. You killed my father. I removed a problem. Marcus was getting suspicious about some financial irregularities. He started asking questions, demanding audits, threatening to bring in outside investigators. He would have discovered certain arrangements that were beneficial to the company's growth. What arrangements? Let's just say that building a tech empire sometimes requires creative funding solutions. Marcus was too ethical to understand that sometimes rules need to be bent for the greater good. Zara felt sick. So you murdered him to cover up your crimes. I solved a problem that would have destroyed everything Kieran had worked for. And I'd do it again. Does he know? Does Kieran know what you did? Vivian's expression flickered for just a moment. Kieran knows what he needs to know. Nothing more, nothing less. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're going to get. Vivian stood, smoothing her skirt. You have until midnight to decide. Your father's reputation or your pathetic little romance with Kieran. Choose wisely. After Vivian left, Zara sat alone in the coffee shop, staring at the fabricated article. The level of detail was staggering. Bank records, witness statements, even photos that looked authentic but couldn't be real. Someone had spent considerable time and money creating this elaborate lie. Her phone rang. This time, it wasn't Kieran. Miss Whitmore? This is Detective Rodriguez, NYPD. I need you to come to the station immediately. What's this about? We've received information suggesting you may be in danger. Mr. Ashford filed a missing person report, and there have been some developments in a related case. 20 minutes later, Zara found herself in a police station conference room, facing a detective who looked like she'd seen every form of human cruelty and wasn't impressed by any of it. We've been investigating irregularities at Blackridge Industries, Detective Rodriguez began. Financial crimes, corporate espionage, possibly murder. Your name has come up several times. As a suspect? As a target. Someone's been monitoring your movements, your communications, your financial transactions. They know where you live, where you work, probably where you had breakfast this morning. The detective slid a photograph across the table. Security camera footage showing a figure in dark clothing outside Zara's apartment building. This person has been watching your building for 3 days. We think they're waiting for the right moment to make a move. Zara studied the image. The figure was too distant to identify, but something about their posture seemed familiar. There's something else, the detective continued. We ran background checks on everyone connected to this case. Most came back clean, but we found something interesting about Vivian Sterling. She handed Zara another document. 10 years ago, she was involved in a relationship with someone named David Sterling. He died in what appeared to be a skiing accident in Colorado. Authorities found evidence suggesting the death might not have been accidental, but the case went cold when the primary witness disappeared. What kind of evidence? The type that suggests Ms. Sterling has a pattern of eliminating people who inconvenience her. Zara's blood turned to ice. You think she killed her husband too? I think Vivian Sterling is a very dangerous woman who's been playing a long game. And I think you need to be extremely careful about any deal she offers you. As if summoned by the detective's words, Zara's phone buzzed with another message. Time's up. Check tomorrow's financial news. Your father's legacy is now in the hands of the highest bidder. Detective Rodriguez read the message and swore. We need to move fast. If she's prepared to go public with fabricated evidence, she's either very confident or very desperate. Both make her exponentially more dangerous. But Zara was no longer listening. A terrible realization was dawning as she remembered something Vivian had said. David Sterling. She'd mentioned needing someone who understood that success required sacrifice. What if Vivian Sterling wasn't her real name? What if she'd taken her dead husband's surname and created an entirely new identity? Detective, Zara said slowly, I need you to run another background check. Look for anyone connected to the original Blackridge Industries Incorporation. Anyone who might have had access to company records from the beginning. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we've been looking at this all wrong. Vivian isn't just some ambitious employee who worked her way up. She's been planning this for much longer than 10 years. The detective's phone rang. She answered with a terse Rodriguez, then listened for several minutes, her expression growing increasingly grim. That was forensics. They found something in the evidence from your father's accident. Something that was missed in the original investigation. What kind of something? Paint transfer on his car that doesn't match any of the environmental elements at the crash site. It came from another vehicle, one that was repainted shortly after the accident to cover the damage. Zara's heart pounded. Do you know what kind of vehicle? A black BMW sedan, registered to a David Sterling. The detective's eyes met Zara's. Your friend Vivian has been lying about more than just her motives. She's been lying about her identity. The abandoned warehouse in Brooklyn felt like stepping into a tomb. Detective Rodriguez had insisted on backup, but when they'd arrived at the address found in Vivian's real apartment, the building appeared empty. Too empty. This doesn't feel right, Phoenix muttered, his hand hovering near his concealed weapon. It's too convenient. Too clean. Zara ignored the warning, driven by a desperate need for answers that had consumed her for days. Somewhere in this building were the truth about her father's death and the identity of the person who'd been orchestrating her destruction. The warehouse stretched endlessly into shadows, filled with rusted machinery and the ghosts of industrial ambitions. Their footsteps echoed in the cavernous space, each sound amplified until it felt like the building itself was announcing their presence. Over here, Detective Rodriguez called from near a makeshift office setup in the corner. Someone's been living here. The space was spartanly furnished, but clearly inhabited. A bed, a desk covered with documents, and walls lined with photographs that made Zara's blood run cold. Pictures of her apartment, her daily routes, the coffee shop where she'd met Vivian. Someone had been studying her life with obsessive detail. But it was the photograph on the desk that stopped her heart. A family portrait from 30 years ago showing two young men who looked remarkably similar. One was clearly Kieran, perhaps in his early 20s. The other shared his features but looked older, harder, with the same steel blue eyes, but none of Kieran's warmth. Darius Ashford, Phoenix said grimly, picking up the photo. Kieran's older brother. Supposedly died in a boating accident 12 years ago. Supposedly, the body was never recovered. Kieran always believed he was dead, but I had my suspicions. A slow clap echoed through the warehouse, causing all three of them to spin toward the sound. A figure emerged from the shadows, and Zara found herself face to face with the man from the photograph. Older now, with silver threading through his dark hair, but unmistakably alive. Hello, little brother's girlfriend, Darius said, his voice carrying the same commanding tone as Kieran's, but with an edge of cruelty that made her skin crawl. You're even prettier than the surveillance photos suggested. Detective Rodriguez reached for her weapon, but Darius raised his hand casually. I wouldn't. My associates have you covered from 3 different angles, and I'd hate for this reunion to turn messy so quickly. Darius. Phoenix's voice was flat, unsurprised. I figured you'd surface eventually. Phoenix Hartwell. Still playing the loyal dog for my baby brother, I see. Though I have to admit, your investigation was more thorough than I expected. You almost found me several times. Almost only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, Phoenix replied. What do you want? What I've always wanted. What should have been mine from the beginning. Darius moved closer, his presence filling the space like a predator claiming territory. Blackridge Industries was supposed to be my inheritance. I was the older son, the one father groomed to take over. But then sweet, noble Kieran had to start the company with his college friend Marcus, cutting me out entirely. So you faked your death and spent 12 years plotting revenge. Zara found her voice, though it came out shakier than she'd intended. Plotting justice, Darius corrected. Marcus was easy enough to eliminate. One conversation with my dear Vivian about the financial irregularities he'd discovered, and suddenly he became a liability that needed handling. Vivian works for you. Vivian is my wife, actually. Has been for 15 years. She took my surname when we married, then conveniently dropped the first name when she needed a new identity. His smile was predatory. Amazing what plastic surgery and a good backstory can accomplish. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. She was never Kieran's ex-fiancée. No, though she played the role beautifully. Getting close to Kieran, earning his trust, working her way up in the company while feeding me information about every major decision. It took years to position everything perfectly. And now I reclaim what's rightfully mine. Kieran's reputation will be destroyed by the financial scandals we've been orchestrating. The board will demand new leadership, and I'll emerge from the dead like Lazarus to save the company I helped create. Detective Rodriguez had been listening quietly, but now she stepped forward. None of this explains why you killed Marcus Whitmore. What threat did he pose to your plans? Darius's expression darkened. Marcus was too honest for his own good. He discovered that someone had been skimming money from client accounts to fund black market technology acquisitions. Military-grade encryption software, experimental AI systems, the kind of tools that give a company a competitive edge. Tools you were stealing. Tools I was acquiring through unconventional channels. Marcus wanted to go to the authorities, expose everything, destroy years of careful planning because of his precious moral principles. Darius's voice turned bitter. So Vivian arranged for him to have an accident before he could ruin everything. You bastard, Zara whispered. I'm a businessman who understands that success requires sacrifice. Your father was a casualty of progress. The sound of approaching vehicles cut through the night air. Multiple engines, moving fast. Darius's expression shifted from confident to annoyed. It seems our conversation will have to be abbreviated, he said, pulling out a phone. Vivian, we have company. Execute Contingency Plan 3. What's Contingency Plan 3? Phoenix demanded. Instead of answering, Darius produced a pistol from inside his jacket. Insurance. The warehouse doors burst open, and Kieran appeared with what looked like half the NYPD behind him. His eyes swept the space, found Zara, and relief flooded his features for exactly 1 second before he saw the gun pointed at her. Hello, little brother, Darius called out. You're just in time for the finale. Darius. Kieran's voice broke on the name. You're alive. Disappointed? I know you held a lovely funeral for me. Very touching, according to the surveillance footage. I mourned you for 12 years. How sweet, but unnecessary, as you can see. Darius kept the gun trained on Zara while addressing his brother. Did you really think you could build an empire on the foundation of our family name without consequences? I built that company with Marcus. You were never part of it. I should have been part of everything. The mask of composure cracked, revealing the fury underneath. Father always intended for me to inherit the family business. But you couldn't stand sharing, could you? You had to start fresh with your college friend, leave your own brother out in the cold. You embezzled $500,000 from Father's company and nearly destroyed it. That's why he cut you out. That's why I had to disappear and start over. But I never forgot who owed me what. The brothers faced each other across the warehouse floor, years of pain and betrayal thick in the air between them. Zara could see the family resemblance clearly now, but where Kieran had inherited their father's conscience, Darius had gotten only his ambition. Let her go, Kieran said quietly. Your fight is with me. Actually, my fight is with the world that should have been mine. But you're right about one thing. She's just collateral damage. Darius shifted the gun toward Kieran, and everything happened at once. Phoenix lunged forward, Detective Rodriguez shouted for backup, and Kieran threw himself sideways toward Zara. The gunshot was deafeningly loud in the enclosed space. Kieran grunted and stumbled, red blooming across his white shirt as he fell. Zara screamed and dropped to her knees beside him, pressing her hands against the wound in his shoulder. Kieran, stay with me. You're going to be okay. His eyes found hers, clouded with pain, but still fierce. I'm sorry. For everything. I should have told you the truth from the beginning. Save your strength. Help is coming. But even as sirens wailed outside, Zara felt strong hands seize her arms. Darius's men had emerged from the shadows, and despite the police presence, They were dragging her toward a rear exit she hadn't noticed. "Kieran," she shouted, but he was losing consciousness, Phoenix applying pressure to his wound while shouting for paramedics. The last thing she saw before being shoved into a waiting van was Vivian Sterling emerging from the darkness, her perfect composure finally replaced by something wild and desperate. "This wasn't the plan," she hissed at Darius as the van doors slammed shut. "Plans change," he replied coldly. "Now we improvise." As the van sped into the night, Zara realized that the chess game was far from over. If anything, they'd just reached the end game, and she was about to discover exactly how far Darius Ashford was willing to go to reclaim his birthright. The abandoned subway station beneath Brooklyn had been out of service for 40 years, but Darius had clearly been using it as a backup headquarters. Industrial lighting cast harsh shadows across rusted tracks and crumbling tile work, while modern computer equipment hummed incongruously in the forgotten space. Zara sat zip-tied to a metal chair, watching Darius pace like a caged animal while Vivian worked frantically at a laptop. The woman who'd once seemed so composed now looked desperate, her perfect hair disheveled and her green eyes wild with panic. "The police found the warehouse too quickly," Vivian snapped. "Someone leaked our location." "It doesn't matter," Darius replied, but his confidence had cracked. "We stick to the plan. Transfer the funds, destroy the evidence, and disappear." "What about her?" Vivian gestured toward Zara with undisguised hatred. "She comes with us. Insurance policy in case Kieran survives and tries to follow." Zara had been listening to their increasingly frantic conversations for 2 hours, and one thing had become clear. Their carefully orchestrated plan was falling apart. They'd expected to frame Kieran for financial crimes and watch him destroy himself trying to prove his innocence. Instead, they were trapped underground with a wounded CEO, an angry police force, and a hostage who was learning far too much about their operation. "The transfer isn't working," Vivian said, her voice rising. "Something's wrong with the encryption protocols." Darius moved to look over her shoulder at the screen. "What do you mean wrong?" "The system keeps rejecting the authentication codes. It's like someone changed the security parameters." Zara couldn't help herself. Despite everything, her mathematical mind was automatically analyzing the problem they were describing. From what she could see of Vivian's screen, they were trying to access offshore accounts using outdated encryption sequences. "You're using a static key exchange," she said. Both of them turned to stare at her. "The banking systems upgraded their security protocols 6 months ago. Static keys don't work anymore. You need dynamic authentication based on prime number sequences that change every 30 seconds. Why would you help us?" Darius demanded suspiciously. "Because I'm curious about how you've been moving money without detection for 12 years. From a purely mathematical standpoint, it's actually quite elegant." Vivian looked ready to argue, but Darius held up a hand. "Show me. I'll need my hands free." "Absolutely not. Then enjoy trying to transfer your stolen millions with obsolete encryption while the FBI closes in." The sound of helicopters overhead punctuated her words. Whatever rescue operation was underway, it was massive. Darius cut her restraints with obvious reluctance. "One wrong move, and you join your father permanently." Zara moved to the computer, her mind racing through possibilities. On the surface, she was helping them escape with stolen money. In reality, she was buying time and gathering evidence. Every keystroke was being logged, every account number recorded. "Your primary mistake was assuming the banks wouldn't upgrade their quantum encryption," she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "But there's a workaround if you know the mathematical principles behind the security algorithms." What she didn't mention was that the workaround she was implementing would leave a digital trail so obvious that even amateur investigators could follow it. She was essentially gift-wrapping evidence for the authorities. "There," she said, stepping back. "Your transfers should work now." Vivian immediately began moving funds, her relief palpable. "It's working. The money's transferring." "Excellent." Darius's gun was still trained on Zara, but his attention was divided between her and the escape tunnel he'd been preparing. "How long until the transfer's complete?" 10 minutes. Then we leave in 8. Above them, the sounds of the search operation were growing closer. Boots on metal, voices echoing through abandoned tunnels. Someone was systematically clearing the underground passages. "Darius," Kieran's voice carried through the darkness. amplified by the tunnel acoustics. I know you're down here. Let her go and we can discuss this. Discuss what? Darius called back. How you stole my birthright. How you built an empire on the foundation of our family name while I rotted in exile. You chose exile when you embezzled from father's company. I chose survival when dear old dad decided his younger son was more worthy of inheritance. Zara used their argument to study the computer screen more carefully. The financial transfers were revealing the scope of Darius and Vivian's operation. Dozens of shell companies, hundreds of millions in stolen funds, and a network of criminal contacts that spanned 3 continents. But it was the final entry in their accounting software that made her blood run cold. A payment scheduled for tomorrow morning, with a memo that read, K.A. Termination, final payment. They weren't just planning to escape. They were planning to have Kieran killed. The transfers are almost complete, Vivian announced. We can go. Actually, Zara said quietly, you can't. Both of them turned to look at her. While you were focused on the money, I was analyzing your operational security. You made a critical error in your mathematical assumptions. What are you talking about? Darius's voice was dangerously low. You assumed I was helping you, but I was actually documenting everything. Account numbers, routing codes, criminal contacts. Every piece of evidence the FBI needs to dismantle your entire operation. Vivian rushed to the computer, her face draining of color as she saw what Zara had done. Instead of facilitating the transfers, Zara had created a comprehensive audit trail that exposed 12 years of criminal activity. You clever little bitch, Vivian snarled. I prefer mathematically superior, Zara replied calmly. Darius raised his gun, but before he could fire, the tunnel filled with smoke and the deafening sound of flashbang grenades. Tactical officers poured through multiple entrances, their laser sights cutting through the artificial fog. In the chaos, Zara dove behind the computer equipment. She heard gunshots, shouts, the distinctive sound of someone hitting the ground hard. When the smoke cleared, Darius was on his knees with his hands zip-tied behind his back, while Vivian was being read her rights by a federal agent. Zara. She turned to see Kieran stumbling down the metal stairs, his left arm in a sling, but his eyes blazing with relief. He crossed the space between them in 3 strides and pulled her against him with his good arm. I thought I'd lost you, he whispered against her hair. You can't get rid of me that easily, she replied, breathing in his familiar scent and feeling something inside her chest finally unclench. Ma'am, Detective Rodriguez appeared beside them. We're going to need a detailed statement about the financial evidence you uncovered. Of course, but there's something else you should know. Zara gestured toward the computer. They were planning to have Kieran assassinated tomorrow morning. The payment authorization is in their accounting system. The detective's expression darkened. We'll add conspiracy to commit murder to the charges. 2 hours later, Zara and Kieran sat in the back of an ambulance while a paramedic checked his shoulder wound. The adrenaline was finally wearing off, leaving them both exhausted but oddly peaceful. I owe you an explanation, Kieran said. About why I hired you, about the investigation, about everything. I already know. Phoenix told me you recognized my name. That's not all of it. He took her hand with his uninjured arm. I did hire you because you were Marcus's daughter, but I promoted you because you're brilliant. And I fell in love with you because you're the most remarkable woman I've ever met. Even though I endangered your company and nearly got you killed, especially because of that, anyone else would have run when things got dangerous. You stayed and fought. Zara leaned against his good shoulder. What happens now? Now we rebuild. The company, the trust, everything. He was quiet for a moment. Zara, there's something else. Legally, you own 50% of Blackridge Industries. Your father's shares were never legitimately transferred. I don't want them. You should take them. You've earned the right to be my partner in every sense of the word. She looked up at him, seeing the sincerity in his steel blue eyes. Partners, if you'll have me. He reached into his jacket pocket with obvious difficulty, given his injured arm. Actually, I was hoping for something more permanent. What he pulled out wasn't a ring box. It was a piece of paper with mathematical equations written in his careful handwriting. What is this? A formula. Work through it. Zara studied the equations, her mind automatically processing the mathematical relationships. It was elegant, complex, and when she solved for the final variable, the answer made her laugh and cry at the same time. The solution is infinity, she whispered. The equation for how long I want to spend loving you, Kieran confirmed. Marry me, Zara. Be my partner in business and life. She kissed him then, tasting salt from her own tears and feeling like the most important mathematical proof of her life had just been solved. Yes, she said against his lips. The answer is always yes. Epilogue 2 years later, the newly renamed Whitmore Ashford Enterprises occupied the top 15 floors of a Manhattan skyscraper, with Zara's mathematical algorithms revolutionizing how the tech industry approached artificial intelligence development. She stood in their shared office, one hand resting on her growing belly, watching her husband present their latest breakthrough to a room full of investors via video conference. Darius and Vivian were serving consecutive life sentences in federal prison. The stolen funds had been recovered and used to establish a foundation in Marcus Whitmore's name, providing scholarships for young mathematicians from disadvantaged backgrounds. Phoenix had been promoted to head of corporate security and was thoroughly enjoying his legitimate salary and benefits package. And Kieran had learned to trust his heart as much as his head, which had made all the difference in building not just a business empire, but a love that could withstand any equation life threw at them. Some problems, Zara reflected as she felt their baby kick, had solutions more beautiful than the mathematics that created them.